Andrew, who do you have on your list, and then if any other member knows anyone else?
Okay, so I'll do the substitutions first. So Councillor McNally is substituting for Councillor Graham. Councillor Pettigrew is substituting for Councillor Danish Ashraf, and Councillor Jones is substituting for Councillor Branham McVeigh. The other apologies are Councillors Anderson, Beveridge, Gallagher, and Masterton.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any other apologies to add to that? No? Okay, fine. Agenda item 1 then is declarations of interest. Councillor Cameron?
Yes, thank you. I've got declarations on 2 items. Item 5 as a member of Business Gateway, and item 7 as a member of the SPT, which is one of the major funding bodies.
Thanks, Councillor Cameron.
And Councillor Cameron, do you want to leave the meeting for those 2 items? I'll put you in the lobby if so.
Yes, considering them both to do with money, I believe that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else? I can't see anyone else in the chat bar.
Sorry, Olivia, I forgot to put myself in the chat bar, but
That's okay.
item 2, employment support and skills, non-pecuniary interest as the chair of Routes to Work.
Thanks, Councillor Curran.
You can put me in the lobby if you want, Andrew.
Well, it's entirely up to you, Councillor Cohen. It's your decision whether you feel it's sufficient to leave the meeting. If you want to err on the side of caution, then I'll place you in the lobby.
Put me in the lobby, yep.
Thanks, Councillor Curran. No other declarations of interest before I move on? No? Okay. Put Councillor Curran in the lobby then, I guess, Andrew.
Okay, that's that done, convener.
Thank you. Okay, so agenda item 2 is the report on employment support and skills, and Paul Kane is going to take us through this.
Okay, thanks, convener. Good afternoon, everyone. So this report is a regular update to Committee on Employment and Skill Support being delivered by the Council. The background to the report in section 1 tells the story of the current labour market. So on the surface, the recovery is well underway, and the claimant count in North Lanarkshire, which is what we use to measure unemployment, is coming down regularly each month. It's 52, though it's still 52% over the pre-COVID level, but at one point in August last year it was 92% over the pre-COVID level. And there's predictions for recovery, full recovery in the labour market by October 22 or July 23, depending on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist. So on the surface, the labour market and the jobs market is good news, but underneath that there's another story that I wanted to highlight as well to you in section 1.3 and 1.4, and that is that long-term unemployment continues to increase. So if you didn't have a job before COVID, then it's unlikely you got a job during that period, therefore you've drifted into longer term unemployment. There's also a lot less flexibility for people who want to do part-time or flexible hours in the labour market, so that's kind of excluding quite a group from accessing employment at the moment, and that goes along with an increase in instability as well, because there's more temporary jobs being offered. Even though there's more jobs, a lot of them are temporary. So that's still something that our programmes are trying to concern themselves with, long-term unemployment and these instability issues, to try and support those people who are facing that predicament. And also the big unknown is the end of furlough at the end of September. I don't know anyone who actually knows what that's who's been able to give a decent prediction on how that's going to impact, whether it's going to be a tsunami or a trickle, but we've got plans in place to try and deal with whatever outcome comes out of that. The body of the report flags up in the first section an increasingly coordinated and integrated approach that the Council has taken internally to employability through its Workforce for the Future strategy. And there's a list of priorities there that that group have, that's the steering group of the Workforce for the Future strategy have identified. And also to give committee some real numbers to actually look at 2.1.3, we flag up that council funded programmes have supported 336 people in the first quarter of this financial year, into employment, and that's higher than the previous quarter and higher than the previous quarter before that, as you would expect because of lockdown and stuff. And that's due to the partnership with Routes to Work, and as well as partnerships within the council. There's an awful lot of work being going on, and interconnected support and work between ourselves and financial inclusion colleagues, community learning and development colleagues, housing, justice, and the enterprise team to get those numbers as high as possible. Last thing I would flag up at 2.2.1 is that we expect some additional funding from the Scottish Government to come in. That's the subject of discussions at COSLA at the moment to try and nail down some of the detail on that. But we expect a significant amount of money for young people, for 16 to 24-year-olds, but also importantly for the over 25s. It's been flagged up we might get 1.4 million to support 140 long-term unemployed residents into work. So obviously, as soon as we get more detail, we would update committee when we can, and on how we best think that funding can be utilised. So thank you. Happy to take any questions if there's any.
Thanks, Paul. I think firstly, just thanks to you and your team for the work that you've managed to do, especially in the tough environment that we've had over COVID. Obviously, still some more to be done. That report tells a story, but thank you. Councillor Damasio?
Thank you, Kavira. It's just really some comments, and just to thank Paul for the report, and I'd like to thank Paul, ask Paul to thank his team for all the hard work that they're putting in during these difficult times for their constituents who find themselves in difficult times. It's vitally important, obviously, as a council, we're doing everything in our power to help residents into work, and I commend him and his team for everything they're doing. And also welcome the government funding, the Scottish Government funding that's helped in the past year and a half, and hopefully look forward to the future funding that Paul's mentioned. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Councillor Damasio. I'm sure Paul will take those comments back to his team. Councillor McGowan?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Paul too for his very positive report, and how it's improving after or during COVID, and that there are more people in employment. I just want to ask one question. In point 2.1.2, it says that there's major EU funded employability programmes. How long will this continue after Brexit? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McGowan. Paul?
Okay, Councillor McGowan, the EU, while Brexit happened in January, there was an agreement between the UK and the EU that these programmes would continue to be funded to the end of their life, and the end of this one's life operationally is December 2022. So we've got that fund until December 2022. The next question is what can replace that, because it was a significant amount of money, and the UK government have flagged up something they're calling the Shared Prosperity Fund as the potential replacement for European funding that the areas can bid into to try and support their economic development to bring it up to the level of more prosperous areas. And thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McGowan. I can't see anyone else in the chat bar. So is everyone just happy to note the recommendations on page 5? Yep, perfect, thank you. Moving on then to agenda item 3, which is the City Deal programme update. Lindsay, I think you're going to take us through this.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Good afternoon, everyone. This is the regular City Deal programme update report, and the paper primarily is for noting, and it's really about the progress around the 5 key City Deal projects. The report is also seeking agreement to submit the Motherwell Muir Street full business case to the Glasgow City Region Chief Executives Group for approval. So can I just draw your attention to section 2.1, Motherwell Town Centre Transport Interchange. As approved by this committee in August 2020, we are currently using the SCAPE Civil Engineering and Infrastructure Framework for the procurement of the Muir Street works. Now, just to point out, the Balfour Beatty is the sole supplier on this particular framework. But given that the station works are being delivered by Balfour Beatty, this framework allows us the opportunity to look at efficiency savings, coordinated delivery, and reducing risk across the programme. So we're currently evaluating the pre-construction tender report from Balfour Beatty. The report to date does demonstrate integrated delivery with the station works and the investment by ScotRail, and does offer, importantly, a coordinated finish with the two contracts delivered at the same time. So the award of the contract itself will be subject to the approval of the full business case by the Glasgow City Region Chief Execs Group, and therefore today we're seeking your agreement to submit the business case, and that is subject to a satisfactory procurement outcome through the SCAPE framework. So can I just draw your attention to section 2.2, which is the Ravenscraig Infrastructure Access Project. So the committee will know that this project is taking place under a number of phases, with the first phase being delivered comprising the new connection into Ravenscraig. So that looks at the new a dual carriageway, from Motherwell into the Ravenscraig Sports Facility, then the underbridge crossing of the West Coast Main Line, a new junction at the top of Airbells Road, and improved active travel. Now, detailed planning has been submitted for all those elements, and we're hoping that that will be considered at the September Planning Committee. So, subject to planning, the crossing element of that first phase will be the first package of works delivered, obviously subject to planning and subject to full business case approval. But we are hoping that work starts, or the enabling element of that work starts in February 2022. So it's quite imminent, and I think that the committee will be pleased to see that progress being made around this huge infrastructure project. But to allow for these works, we are starting to assemble land that's required to deliver the project. So we're currently in negotiations with a number of businesses, particularly in and around the West Coast Main Line. To continue the project, we do need to acquire more land. So we will be doing that, and the intention is to do that through voluntary agreement. But at some point, we will need to bring forward a report to committee to seek approval for the use of compulsory purchase powers, and we'll report that in due course. Another key project is under 2.3, the East Airdrie Link Road. So the last time we reported to committee, we were just about to commence a pretty broad community engagement exercise as part of stage 2 option appraisal. I can confirm that's now been completed, and a preferred route has been identified, which links Chapel Hall all the way north to the dual carriageway of north of Brig. So as part of this, as I said, there was a big public consultation exercise. It was during lockdown, so it was a bit of a challenge for us to start with, but we did overcome that, and we had quite a good level of engagement. So the feedback from that exercise that was carried out in May and June will feed fully into the next stage of the development of the project, and any kind of comments and concerns will be fully considered. In general, the feedback was positive. It was constructive, so we've got quite a lot to feed into the next stage, which is helpful. So the preferred route, I should point out, does accommodate the proposed realignment for the replacement Monklands Hospital at the Western Moffat site, and we're in current dialogue with NHS Lanarkshire around that to ensure a coordinated approach. And that's all I'm going to highlight in the report. There are other projects in there, so I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. That was a nice thorough update. I can't see anyone in the chat bar, but does anyone have any comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Damasio, followed by Councillor McGowan. Councillor Damasio.
Sorry, apologies. Yeah, just a couple of things. On the Muir Street project, due to the unorthodox manner, if you like, of the tendering process due to the committee cycle, and the need to progress that in between committees. I'm just looking for a couple of assurances, essentially, from officers that we will get an update report at the next committee on that, how that progressed. I'm sure that would be expected anyhow, and just an assurance also that seeking approval outside the committee cycle that the value won't be any more than was previously agreed in the May committee. On the Ravenscraig project, just another ask of officers, if you like, at the next for our next update report. Would it be possible? I know that the information we've been updated basically in terms of land acquisition, property acquisition. It's a little bit vague, and I know if you're on finance and resource, most of those acquisitions, all of those acquisitions will go through finance and resources. I was wondering if at the next committee we could perhaps even just have an appendix within the report just to update us on all those land acquisitions. And just lastly on the Airdrie Link Road, when do we expect, sort of timescale wise, that we are likely to have finalised the preferred route? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Damasio. Lindsay, I don't know if you can tackle some of those questions.
Yeah, no, I'll do that. Thanks. So that the first point around Motherwell Muir Street, certainly, I think we can give you our assurance that a follow-up report will come to the next committee. That is subject to us, accepting that the tender from Balfour Beatty using the framework. The alternative is if we don't go down the framework route and we don't find that the tender is acceptable, we would have to re-tender, and it would be we would be looking to not start the works until June 22. So at the moment we're evaluating, and it does look like the report does offer the benefits that we're looking for, but we certainly would bring a paper to the next committee. On the point about our Ravenscraig infrastructure access, certainly, as far as I'm aware, we can put in an appendix to the next update paper. I think the next update paper isn't to the next cycle, so we could probably just bring forward an update around those issues under that particular project, if that's appropriate. And East Airdrie Link Road, the preferred route that's been identified and realigned to accommodate the hospital is the preferred route. So that is what's been taken forward into stage 3 and will be developed up further into detailed design.
Thanks, Lindsay. Councillor Damasio, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. Councillor McGowan.
Good afternoon, Lindsay. As a local member and as a resident, obviously in Motherwell, I welcome all these developments, and I welcome the dualling of Airbus Road. I've waited for that for a long while, and I'm delighted with that. And I'm also delighted there's a number of surveys along Airbus Road to assess the current provision of controlled crossings. That was one of the comments I put in my submission. But there's one thing that still worries me about it, and that is the roundabout at the end of Adele Street. Is there going to be a survey, or is that going to be increased in size? Because it's actually too small just now for the traffic that goes up Airbus Road. I've got a particular interest because I stay in Adele Street, and it's difficult enough to get out of that roundabout. So is there any thoughts of increasing the size of that roundabout or changing it in some way to make it safer for 2 vehicles to go around it? Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Councillor McGowan. Lindsay?
Thank you. Councillor McGowan, can I come back to you on that particular point? There will be survey work that will have a look to that particular area, but I don't want to give you any incorrect information, but certainly I can come back to you on the detail around that.
That would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more people in the chat bar looking to come in. So if not, can we note the report and agree to the submission with regards to Motherwell Muir Street? Yeah, perfect. Moving on then to agenda item 4, Pam.
Thanks, Councillor Carson. So this report is to make members aware of a potential Glasgow City Region bid for Greenport status if and when agreement is reached between the UK and Scottish Governments regarding what the model would be for free ports in Scotland, what the bidding process would be, and perhaps critically what the associated funding would be that would be attached to that. So the potential Glasgow City Region bid would incorporate all 3 types of ports within the Glasgow City Region geography, and that would include the seaport at Greenock, the Glasgow Airport, and most importantly for us, the rail freight terminal and associated areas at Moss End. As the report outlines, free ports are obviously well established in other countries and can provide a sort of combination of tax and customs incentives to help attract businesses and investment into these zones and into these areas in terms of import, export, manufacturing, or businesses that process goods as they come in. So the particular Greenport model that the Scottish Government have developed and is published in their draft prospectus that they developed earlier in the year really seeks to incorporate a sort of fair working practices as being a requirement or a condition of getting these designations and the associated incentives and benefits, and also critically a commitment to a transition to the net zero carbon economy and to make sure that we're incorporating that within the processes. So already in England, because the Freeport model was obviously the bidding for that was already announced, and that has now resulted in 8 locations already selected for Freeports in England. And obviously they say that there was £175 million of funding that was identified that would be associated, or seed corn funding that was potentially available for Freeports. So clearly we would be anxious in Scotland not to be at a competitive sort of disadvantage in terms of the fact that these Freeports already now have been designated. So in terms of moving forward, the Scottish Government had asked for expressions of interest from potential Greenport bids in Scotland. And although that wasn't a condition in terms of putting in a future bid, they were just wanting to find out what the level, or gauge the level of interest. And by the 27th of July, they received 9 notes of interest, including the potential Glasgow City Region bid. So that was quite a wide range of potential bids in Scotland. So basically, we're still awaiting the outcome in terms of the joint prospectus to see what the outcome of that is going to be. As we said in the report, it had been anticipated, I think, that would probably have been available by now, or issued by now, following the Scottish Government elections. Clearly that's not happened yet, but the indications or the feedback that we're getting is that those discussions are still ongoing, and so we would hope that there will be a joint prospectus issued now, potentially in the autumn, and obviously we'll keep the committee updated. But the report is really seeking approval for the council as part of the Glasgow City Region to support and participate in a future bid if and when the prospectus is released. Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Yeah, just to reiterate, this is just to approve a potential bid should we get the prospectus published. I've got 2 people, Councillor Cameron, followed by Councillor Damasio. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions and concerns to raise about this report. It's well written and I do understand it. I'll start with the simplest one. How were the private partners decided on? I've asked this purely because at least one of the private partners has had issues with its local councillor, local council, for instance, refusing planning permission for expansion, and I'm quite surprised to see that involved as a local partner when the local council in question was not in favour of its expansion. The other main question I have is, and I think I understood from the discussions that we have no set cut-off date to have a bid in ready to go. So I would like to know why we're being asked to delegate responsibility to approve the bid to the chief executive and the leader of the council, rather than it coming back to committee, either the standard committee, because we've got another one to go in 2021, or a special committee called for it, because everything I've got date-wise says the bid will likely be in by the end of 2021, but no specific dates. So I was wondering why we're having to give special delegated powers. And the other question, which is more a general one, because I'm slightly reserved on the Greenport idea for Glasgow, because at the minute we have enough problems losing business SMEs to Glasgow. And even with this, it seems to give more levers to Glasgow to remove more SMEs from us, even though it supposedly puts us all on a level footing. I do not believe it looks like it would give them more levers to remove businesses from Glasgow, rendering us more of a commuter area. So I'd like to find out if there's been any work done on that to find out if that's the case. I do understand, though, that it might be the least worst option to be in the Greenport rather than outside it. So those are my three questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cameron. I'll let Pam come in, but I would guess the reason that we're asking to delegate responsibility is because we don't know when the date for the bid will be. So if there isn't another committee, when we get the prospectus, but I'll let Pam answer that fully.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, as you've stated, we don't know if and when there will be a prospectus. What the indications are that when the prospectus is issued, well, the intention was certainly that there would be about 12 weeks for the bids to be prepared. So that was the period. But whether they'd be looked to shorten that, given I say we're now getting further down the line. But obviously, if time, depending on committee cycles, then that would be fine. We would do that. But it's just to make sure that we've got that flexibility, and obviously this would also be going through the Glasgow City Region cabinet process as well. So there will obviously be political oversight from that point of view. In terms of the partners been selected, I mean, the private sector partners really came together themselves in effect, in terms of working together and the potential to work together and be part of a Glasgow City Region bid. So it wasn't sort of led by or selected by in any way the Glasgow City Region partnership. These partners were already basically had already come together as potential partners in that process, and clearly for us, having Moss End located in our area is this potential advantage, and indeed the fact that the Moss End rail freight terminal has got the associated land that's already been identified for potential future business and industry development. So from that perspective, we have potentially got an even greater advantage, or potentially more benefits to gain if indeed the status, the Freeport or Greenport status does confer that the benefits that would attract or help attract new businesses and new investment. We've potentially arguably got more potential to take advantage of that. I'm not quite sure about your point about moving to Glasgow, because obviously Glasgow City in terms of the council area, doesn't have any of these supposed ports or associated designations. So, as I say, from our perspective, there's potentially more advantage to North Lanarkshire than there is to Glasgow City. So hopefully that answers the questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Pam. Robert, I think you were going to come in on the bid timing potentially.
I was just actually coming in the delegation part. Pam touched on it. It's we're looking for delegated authority for the leader of the council and the chief executive, because it will be a Glasgow City region bid, and the cabinet then of the Glasgow City region has to approve it, and it's the leader of the council and the chief executive who are the cabinet members. So they would require that authority to sit on the Glasgow City region cabinet to approve the city region bid. So it's purely that. If the timings permit to come to committee, then of course we will do that. But they require that authority to actually approve the city region bid, and that's why it's specifically outlined in the report in the way it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. Councillor Cameron, does that help you?
Yeah, that answers my questions. It wasn't plain in the report. It was because they had to sit on the city region. It just looked as if it was in general they were getting delegated responsibility to approve it at council level. But if it's because of the city region, I can understand that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Cameron. Councillor Damasio?
Thanks, Convener. And thank you, officers, for the answers to Councillor Cameron's questions. That was helpful. Just given the question marks, if you like, that the Scottish Government raised with Freeports, in relation to, a lot of people have fears, in relation to potential criminality, erosion of workers' paying conditions, etc., payment of living wage, things like that. The Scottish Government have obviously been down a different route with the green ports, and I'm sure within the finalised prospectus, a lot of those issues will be covered. However, the agreement may potentially be, and we'll still to see the final perspective and details, that may be a voluntary thing that these contractors involved and all parties involved will sign up to. Can I seek, and I understand this is at a very early stage and it's just the prospective stage and putting in a potential bid, etc. So I'm sure there'll be further discussions in committees down the line, but can I just seek assurances at this stage from both officers and our elected members who are representing us on City Deal and in negotiations with the contractors, that dialogue with and when they're in dialogue with these contractors, that they promote and make such agreements as basically as watertight as possible, and look after the interests of the local area constituents and workers who may eventually be working in the green ports, etc.
Thanks, Councillor Damasio. I think Pam said that the Scottish Government were obviously keen to promote fair work as part of their Green Ports prospectus, and obviously that covers a lot of the points. And I think if the finalised prospectus deviated significantly from the the draft one, we would need to come back. But I'll let Pam come in with any other comments.
Yeah, and as I say, that is why the Scottish Government have been specifically looking for these requirements to be part of the criteria or the condition for green ports, as they've called them in Scotland. But I mean, yes, obviously we can give assurance to Councillor Damasio in terms of any potential power or influence that the council may have in that. But I mean, I think it's important to stress that the council wouldn't have a kind of regulatory really role in relation to that. So that would obviously be subject to whatever sort of powers and regulations are put in place around the tax incentives and so on. But yes, I think we'd probably all agree that we see that as being an important principle, along with the net zero carbon commitment as well. as being part of the designation. But hopefully that gives some assurance.
Thanks, Pam. Does that give you some assurance, Councillor Damasio, that we'll do what we can?
Yep, that's great.
Thank you. Okay, so I can't see anyone else looking to come in. Are we happy to approve the recommendations on page 19? Perfect. Moving on then to agenda item 5. This item is the contract award for Lanarkshire Business Gateway, and it's just for noting. So unless anyone has any questions, are we all happy to note the recommendations on page 25?
Great.
Perfect. Moving on then to agenda item 6. Again, another report just for noting, contract award for East Airdrie Link Road. So unless anyone has any questions, are we happy to note the recommendations on page 41? Take your silence as agreement. And then finally, agenda item 7. This is for approval, and it's the contract award for the Ravenscraig Access Travel Link Road. So are we happy, unless anyone has any questions, are we happy to approve the recommendations on page 51? Yes. Okay. Again, I'll take your silence as agreement. That's everything. So thanks all for your time. You can have your afternoon back. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Chair.